The Galactic Council had existed for 12,000 years. 17 species had come together under one banner of peace and cooperation. They had built stations that orbited dying stars. They had created trade routes that stretched across millions of light years. They had solved problems that would make lesser civilizations weep in confusion. But now, for the first time in their long history, they faced something they could not solve with diplomacy or trade or scientific advancement. The had arrived. Ambassador of the species stood before the massive holographic display in the council chamber. Her forearms trembled as she watched the feed from the outer rim. Colony after colony burned. Ships that had never known war crumbled like paper against the swarm. The invaders moved through space like a plague, consuming everything in their path. They did not negotiate. They did not trade. They simply ate and expanded and destroyed. We have lost contact with 47 colonies in the past rotation, announced to the silent chamber. The fleet numbers in the hundreds of thousands. Our combined military forces total less than 8,000 vessels. High Chancellor, an ancient being made of living crystal, spoke in tones that echoed through the room. We are a peaceful federation. We have not known war for 3,000 years. Our weapons are outdated. Our soldiers are ceremonial guards. We cannot fight this enemy. The chamber fell into despair. Species that had lived in harmony for generations now faced extinction. Some proposed surrender, hoping the would accept slaves. Others suggested fleeing to unknown space. None believed they could actually fight. It was then that a small voice spoke from the back of the chamber. There is one species we have not contacted. Every head turned to look at Junior Diplomat, a young member of the species. His scales had turned pale with fear, but he continued speaking. The humans. They joined the Federation only 50 years ago. They are young, primitive by our standards, but I have read their history files. They are different. High Chancellor made a sound of dismissal. The humans. They have barely mastered faster-than-light travel. Their fleet consists of perhaps 200 ships. What could they possibly offer against the swallowed hard? With respect, Chancellor, you should read their history, all of it, especially the parts they warned us not to read. 3 days later, a human delegation arrived at the council station. Ambassador walked into the chamber with a confidence that seemed almost inappropriate given the circumstances. She was flanked by 2 men in dark uniforms. Their eyes scanned the room constantly, analyzing, assessing, calculating threats. They were not diplomats. Everyone in the chamber could sense that immediately. You called for military assistance, said without ceremony. We received your transmission. We understand that cannot be reasoned with. We understand they have destroyed your fleets. We understand you believe this war is already lost. High Chancellor leaned forward. And what do you believe, Ambassador? Smiled. It was not a warm smile. We believe you misunderstand what war actually means. She gestured to one of the men beside her. He stepped forward and activated a small device. A holographic display flickered to life, showing Earth's history, but not the version the Council had seen before, not the sanitized version humanity had provided when they joined the Federation. This was the truth. The Council watched in growing horror as centuries of human conflict played before their eyes. They saw trenches filled with bodies. They saw cities reduced to ash. They saw weapons that could split atoms and turn entire regions into wastelands. They saw humans fighting humans with a brutality that made the look almost restrained. But more than the violence, they saw something else. They saw adaptation. They saw innovation born from desperation. They saw a species that had spent its entire existence trying to kill itself and had somehow become terrifyingly good at it. We do not have a traditional military, explained as the images continued. We found that traditional armies are too slow, too predictable, too bound by rules that enemies will not follow. Instead, we developed something different. We call them special operations units. Some call them black operations teams. Others call them death squads. Ambassador found her voice. Death squads. Small units of highly trained individuals who specialize in unconventional warfare, assassination, sabotage, psychological operations. They do not fight wars the way you understand them. They do not line up and trade fire with enemies. They strike from shadows. They destroy leadership. They break the enemy's will to fight before the enemy even knows they are there. High Chancellor's crystal form flickered with uncertainty. This is barbaric. Smile faded. Yes, it is, and that is exactly why it works. The council debated for 6 hours. Many members were appalled by what they had seen. The humans were savages, they argued, monsters barely more civilized than themselves. Allowing them to lead the defense would be inviting another predator into their home. But as the hours passed, the reports from the front grew worse. 2 more systems fell. 300,000 civilians were consumed by the swarm. The council realized they had no choice. They could cling to their principles and watch their civilization die, or they could unleash humanity and pray they could contain them afterward. They chose survival. Within 1 week, human ships began arriving at the staging area. They were not the gleaming vessels the council species favored. They were dark, angular, ugly things designed for one purpose only. Each ship carried teams of operators whose files were classified beyond anything the council could access. Commander Cole led the operation. He was not a tall man, and he was not physically imposing. But when he entered a room, even the most powerful council members felt an instinct to step back. There was something in his eyes that spoke of things done in darkness, of lines crossed that could never be uncrossed. They operate on a hive structure, explained during the first strategy session. Destroy their queens and the drones become disorganized. Destroy enough queens and the entire swarm collapses. Your species have been trying to fight the drones. Millions of drones. That is not how we will operate. He pulled up a tactical display showing territory. We have identified 17 primary hive ships. Each one contains a queen. We will insert teams into each ship simultaneously. We will kill the queens. We will destroy the ships from within. And we will do this before they even understand they are under attack. The council military advisors protested. The plan was impossible, they claimed. The hive ships were surrounded by thousands of drone vessels. No fleet could penetrate those defenses. Simply stared at them. We are not sending a fleet. The insertion happened during what they considered their sleep cycle. 17 small craft, each no larger than a personal shuttle, slipped through gaps in the drone patrols. They used technology the council had never seen, stealth systems that made them invisible to every known sensor type. The teams landed on the organic hulls of the hive ships and cut their way inside. What happened next was not a battle, it was a massacre. The human operators moved through the living corridors like ghosts. They killed silently when silence was possible and explosively when it was not. The warriors they encountered were large and deadly, but they had never faced an enemy like this. An enemy that struck without warning, that used their own ship against them, that seemed to melt into shadows and reappear behind them. Team 7, led by Sergeant, reached the Queen Chamber first. The Queen was a massive creature, surrounded by elite guards bred specifically to protect her. His team numbered 6 people. The guards numbered over 100. The fight lasted 4 minutes. When it was over, planted explosive charges around the Queen's corpse and led her surviving team to extraction. Behind them, the hive ship began to die. Across 17 ships, similar scenes played out. Not all teams survived. Some fought to the last operator, detonating themselves along with their targets. Others escaped by margins so thin that luck seemed like the only explanation. But when the dust settled, all 17 queens were dead. The effect on the swarm was immediate and catastrophic. Drone ships began colliding with each other. Attack patterns dissolved into chaos. The hive mind that had coordinated millions of individuals suddenly fell silent, and the creatures that remained became little more than animals, dangerous but directionless. The council fleets moved in to clean up what remained. What would have been a hopeless battle became a slaughter in reverse. They were driven back, system by system, until they retreated beyond the galactic rim. The war was over in 3 months. When Commander Cole returned to the council chamber, he was greeted as a hero. But the celebration was muted. The council members looked at him with a new understanding. They had seen what humanity was capable of. They had witnessed the darkness that lurked beneath the friendly smiles and diplomatic handshakes. High Chancellor approached personally. "You have saved our civilization, Commander. The debt we owe your species cannot be measured, but I must ask, how do you live with what you do? How do you return to normal life after such work?" Considered the question for a long moment. When he answered, his voice was quiet. "We do not return to normal life, Chancellor. That is the sacrifice we make, so others do not have to." He turned and walked away, leaving the council in silence. In the years that followed, humanity's role in the Federation changed. They were no longer seen as primitive newcomers. They were seen as something far more complex, protectors, certainly, but also something to be watched, something to be careful around. The galaxy had called for an army. Humanity had answered with something far more effective, and now the galaxy had to live with the consequences of that answer. Some nights, when the stars were quiet and the trade routes hummed with peaceful commerce, the older council members would remember the war. They would remember the reports of what happened inside those hive ships, and they would quietly hope that humanity would never have reason to turn those skills against their allies. Because they had seen the truth that humanity had tried to hide. War was not something humans did. War was something humans were. And the galaxy would never forget that lesson.